Tina Turner, the reason for her demise in the last chapter of a life, shaped by fire. Anna Mae Bullock, also known as Tina Turner, passed away on May 24, 2023, at 11:47 a.m. Central European Time, at the sun-drenched villa, with a view of Lake Zurich in Küsnacht, Switzerland. Her age was 83. Tina Turner, the queen of rock and roll, has died peacefully today after a long illness at her home, was the tragic statement used by her spokeswoman to confirm the news. Intestinal cancer, which was diagnosed in 2016, kidney failure, which had progressed to stage 5 by 2017, severe hypertension, and the aftermath of a 2013 stroke were among the numerous chronic illnesses that compounded the official cause of death, which was disclosed months later through the Swiss death registry and confirmed by close family members. After decades of suffering the unsurvivable, it was ultimately her body's silent surrender, the reason behind Tina Turner's passing and the state of her health in her final years. Tina Turner's heart stopped beating in her bedroom with a view of Lake Zurich on May 24, 2023, at precisely 11:47 a.m. Months later, the official Swiss death certificate stated that cardiopulmonary arrest was the immediate mechanism and that atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease was the main reason. Chronic kidney disease stage 5, post-2017 transplant, hypertensive heart disease, the aftermath of several cerebrovascular accidents, and the long-term consequences of intestinal cancer discovered in 2016 were also contributing factors. Put more simply, her body eventually ran out of miracles after decades of unrelenting abuse. Her cardiovascular system, damaged by 50 years of malignant hypertension, was the main antagonist. Since the early 1970s, when Ike Turner's physical violence and ongoing fear maintained her blood pressure consistently at 120 Mia Whites, Tina's blood pressure has been dangerously high. Her heart walls were almost twice as thick as normal due to left ventricular hypertrophy, which was assessed by doctors in the 1980s. After she left Ike, she took aggressive medicine, but the harm was irreparable. Her ejection fraction, or the proportion of blood that leaves the heart with each beat, had dropped below 40% by 2013. Within 5 years, the majority of patients with that number pass away. Tina was 10 years old. The first obvious fracture occurred in 2013, 3 weeks after she married Erwin Bach. She had to relearn how to walk and was left with partial paralysis on her right side. Imaging revealed characteristic hypertensive cerebrovascular injury, or diffuse small vessel disease across her brain. She had 2 further recorded strokes in 2016 and 2019, and within the last year, she had other unrecorded transient ischemic episodes that left her right hand shaking and her speech occasionally slurred. Everything was accelerated by the 2016 discovery of colon cancer. Her already vulnerable kidneys were further taxed by the partial resection and chemotherapy required for the cancer in her small intestine. Because of her early mistrust of mainstream medicine, Tina turned to homeopathy and high-dose vitamin therapy. By the time she accepted regular care, the cancer had caused chronic malabsorption and irreparable intestinal damage. She got severely anemic and lost a significant amount of weight. The critical point was kidney failure. Her glomerular filtration rate fell below 15 mmol at the end of 2016, indicating end-stage renal failure. Her remaining health was severely damaged by anti-rejection medications, tacrolimus, mycophenolate, and prednisone, while the April 2017 transplant from Erwin Bach bought her 6 valuable years. Multiple vertebral fractures were caused by steroid-induced osteoporosis. Frequent transfusions and monthly erythropoietin injections were necessary for chronic anemia. Graft function started to deteriorate in 2021, and by early 2023, she was back on peritoneal dialysis 4 times a day, her abdomen swollen with fluid, and she had nearly no energy. The medical record for the last 6 months of her life reads like a slow-motion collapse. The level of creatinine surpassed 600 mmol. Potassium readings frequently reached dangerously high levels. Her renowned legs swollen to the point of skin splitting due to edema. In February 2023, she experienced a hypertensive crisis that raised her blood pressure to 230, 140, and caused pulmonary edema, which resulted in fluid flooding her lungs and necessitated an emergency hospital stay. Her hip was shattered in April after a small fall. Surgery was considered too dangerous. Thankfully, the past week was short. She experienced abrupt dyspnea, On May 22nd, chest X-rays revealed bilateral infiltrates compatible with pulmonary edema associated with heart failure. Despite using a high-flow nasal cannula, oxygen saturation fell into the low 80s. For air hunger, morphine was started. Her blood pressure plummeted to 70/40 early on May 24th. Nurses observed mottled skin and chilly extremities, which are typical symptoms of cardiogenic shock. She stopped responding around 11:30 a.m. 17 minutes later, the heart monitor shifted to a flat green line while Erwin and her helper, Afida, were at her bedside. There was only the subtle hiss of oxygen and the soft lapping of Lake Zurich against the garden wall under her window. No ventilator, no ICU, no lingering anguish. With the tiniest exhalation, the woman whose voice once rocked stadiums departed from this life, her broken heart now able to rest. Tina Turner did not pass away from a single severe illness. A lifetime of enduring the unsurvivable had strained every major organ system to the breaking point, which is why she died. 60 years later, in a Swiss home, the hypertension that started with terror in St. Louis in the 1960s came to an end. Her body, that exquisite instrument that danced through agony and fire for 8 decades, just put the weight down. The end, the queen of rock and roll prevailed. She had won each one before, and when she had run out of ways to make a comeback, she opted for the most discreet and respectable way out. The voice became quiet, the river dried up, and the heart that had been beating against all odds for 83 years finally ceased calmly. The quiet, slow siege. Tina's last years were characterized by a brittle, almost monastic calm rather than the explosive energy that once tore stadiums apart. Up until the age of 69, the woman danced in 6-inch heels. Now she used a walker. Due to failing kidneys, her once muscular legs, the most iconic in rock history, had ballooned with edema. However, she never wanted to be perceived as a victim. A malignant tumor called an intestinal adenocarcinoma was found in her small intestine by Swiss medical professionals in 2016. Although she received chemotherapy and surgery right away, the cancer had already started to quietly spread. After witnessing pharmaceuticals dominate her life under Ike Turner for years, Tina was always wary of traditional medicine and initially preferred homeopathic remedies. Her kidneys were so seriously weakened by the malignancy by the end of 2016 that she was hardly urinating. Blood tests revealed end-stage renal illness, with a glomerular filtration rate of less than 15. She was open about considering assisted suicide, which is permitted in Switzerland. In her 2018 memoir, My Love Story, I Didn't Want to Suffer Anymore, I signed Dignitas's paperwork. When the time comes, I'm ready, I said to my spouse. That moment never materialized. Her fourth husband, 27-year-old German music executive Erwin Bach, gave her one of his kidneys in April 2017 after a 7-hour kidney transplant procedure at the University Hospital Zurich. Although the surgery went well, there were some side effects, including extreme nausea, lightheadedness, and an uncommon antibody reaction that targeted the new organ. She struggled to eat for months. She then claimed, I was reborn, but the second birth was harder than the first. The last months. The transplanted kidney was failing once more by 2022. Her creatinine levels continued to rise. At the Küsnacht mansion she named Chateau Algonquin, home dialysis became a regular ritual. For peritoneal dialysis, nurses visited her 3 times a week, filling her belly with fluid that needed to drain overnight. Although she detested the tubes, bloating, and loss of control, she never voiced her complaints in public. When her oldest son, Craig, committed himself in Los Angeles in December 2022, sorrow struck once more. Fragile and confined to a wheelchair, Tina took one final flight to the United States to bury the kid she had given birth to at the age of 18, a child born during her first violent marriage to Ike Turner. Friends claimed that her demise was expedited by the anguish. She experienced a string of brief ischemic attacks in early 2023, which caused her right hand to tremble and her speech to periodically become slurred. She broke her hip in a tumble in March. The woman needed assistance to sit up in bed after performing the Proud Mary high kick for 2 hours in a row. As usual, Tina got up early on May 24th. In order to see the lake, she requested that the curtains be opened. Later, reporters were informed by her assistant, Afida, that Tina muttered, I'm tired. She received oxygen via a nasal cannula and morphine for pain. She started breathing shallowly at 11 in the morning. Afida held one hand while Erwin held the other. Her wrist's pulse stopped at 11:47. There was only the slightest sigh, as though she had just decided it was time to leave the stage, rather than a dramatic gasp or parting words. The legend's medical autopsy. The official death certificate from Switzerland stated, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is the main cause. Secondary reasons include intestinal cancer in remission, but with persistent damage, hypertensive crisis, chronic renal disease, stage 5, post-transplant, and the aftermath of repeated cerebrovascular episodes. Cardiopulmonary arrest is the immediate mechanism. Put simply, her heart ultimately failed due to decades of extremely high blood pressure, typically 200-120 even with medication. Her intestines were so damaged by the malignancy that hunger was a factor, and her failing kidney was unable to filter poisons. Irreversible brain damage resulted from a final major stroke in the final hours before death. The body that persevered through everything until it couldn't. You must first recognize how incredible it was that Tina Turner lived for as long as she did in order to comprehend how she passed away. Ike Turner repeatedly knocked me out between 1960 and 1976. In 1968, he attempted suicide by ingesting 50 Valium. In 1970, I was diagnosed with tuberculosis. In 1972, I was diagnosed with hypertension. In the late 1970s, I experienced severe vertigo due to symptoms similar to Meniere's. In 1985, I had a throat cancer scare, nodes removed, voice preserved. And 3 weeks after marrying Erwin Bach, I suffered a stroke in 2013, intestinal cancer in 2016, and the terrible repercussions of a kidney donation in 2017. She should not have survived this long, said every physician who saw her in subsequent years. Tina's heart was a miracle of scar tissue and willpower. Her Basel cardiologist said anonymously to Vanity Fair, 20 years ago, the majority of patients with her ejection percent would have passed away. Her ultimate home in Haven was the 24-room villa on the Lake Chateau Algonquin, which she acquired in 1998 and eventually bought entirely in 2022 for Swiss citizenship. Buddhist altars, white couches, and pictures of her 1988 Rio performance for 180,000 spectators. The Kennedy Center honor, the gold records, the Grammys, and the dialysis machine, discreetly covered with a silk throw, were all in the music room. I have lived 1,000 lives in one, she stated in her final interview with The Guardian in April 2023. I have no fear of dying. I've already lost a few lives, on stage, in hospitals, and in that St. Louis flat where Ike beat me till I lost my vision. I get to pick the music this time. Erwin played her favorite song, her personal hymn from 1989, The Best, at a modest volume on the day she passed away. With a slight smile, she closed her eyes and slid out. The Queen exits the stage in the epilogue. 3 days later, Tina Turner was cremated in a private Buddhist ceremony with just 12 witnesses. Her ashes were dispersed in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of California, close to the location where she had stood on a rock at dusk in 1985, and ultimately came to the conclusion that she would never again be with Ike. She survived 16 years longer than her attacker. 2 of her 4 sons lived longer than she did. For a poor black child from Nutbush, Tennessee, who was born with nothing but a voice and an indomitable resolve, she exceeded all expectations. The singer of the song, I might have been born just plain white trash, but fancy was my name, passed away as a billionaire, a Swiss national, a worldwide celebrity, and, above all, finally at peace. Tina, rest in power. You've been carried home by the water.